Hands where I can see them.
Officer, is there a problem? This is my vehicle.
I said don't talk. Did I ask you to talk? So shut your mouth. I'm simply trying to understand.
You
always got something to say. Always
I'm
running your mouth. Match your description, and that's all you need to know.
The fluorescent lights of the Quick Fuel gas station on Independence Boulevard cast harsh shadows across the concrete at 9:47 p.m. on a Thursday night in Charlotte, North Carolina. The station was quiet at that hour, just a few cars at the pumps, a clerk behind bulletproof glass, and the low hum of refrigeration units inside the convenience store. 3 security cameras mounted on the canopy recorded continuously in high definition, capturing every vehicle that pulled in, every customer who stepped out, every transaction completed under the bright artificial glow. A black Lexus sedan pulled into pump number 4. The driver's door opened, and a 58-year-old black woman stepped out. She was dressed in tailored slacks and a cream silk blouse, her gray-streaked hair pulled back in an elegant twist. Her movements were calm and unhurried as she inserted her credit card and reached for the fuel nozzle. She had no idea that in less than 2 minutes, her face would be pressed against that concrete, blood pooling beneath her cheek, a white police officer's knee driving into her spine. What happened next was captured from 3 different angles with crystal clarity: the patrol car pulling in with lights flashing, the officer approaching with his hand already on his weapon. The words exchanged, inaudible on the security footage but preserved on witness phones. The grab, the twist, the violent takedown that sent a dignified woman crashing to the ground with enough force to fracture her cheekbone. What the officer didn't know, what he couldn't have imagined, as he pressed his full weight into her back and shouted commands at a woman who wasn't resisting, was that beneath him lay the Honorable Vivian Terrell, federal judge, 4th Circuit Court of Appeals, one of the most powerful judicial appointments in the United States, one step below the Supreme Court itself. His body cam was conveniently malfunctioning, but the gas station cameras never blinked. Within 72 hours, that footage would reach the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court. Within a week, it would be viewed by 12 million people. Within a month, the officer's career would be over, his freedom stripped, his name synonymous with everything broken in American policing. But at 9:47 p.m., he didn't know any of that. He only knew that he had a black woman on the ground, and in his mind, that meant he was in control. He was wrong. Before we continue, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe because what happens next will leave you absolutely stunned. Officer Craig Bellamy was 42 years old and had worn the badge of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department for 17 years. His official personnel file painted the picture of a competent officer: commendations for community service, letters of appreciation from local business owners, performance reviews that consistently rated him as meets expectations or above. His sergeant, a man named Langford who had supervised him for 6 years, referred to him as old reliable. But official files rarely tell the whole story. Buried in a separate database, accessible only through internal affairs requests, was a different record entirely. 31 complaints filed against Officer Bellamy over 12 years. 27 of them came from black citizens. The allegations formed a pattern so clear that anyone who looked could see it: racial profiling, excessive force, verbal abuse, unlawful searches, intimidation. None of those complaints resulted in discipline, not one. The department had developed a system for handling such accusations: investigate slowly, interview selectively, conclude that evidence was insufficient or that the officer's account could not be contradicted, file the complaint away and move on. It was a machine designed to protect its own, and Bellamy had learned to operate within it with confidence. 11 of those 27 complaints came specifically from black women. The language in their statements was strikingly similar. They described being called aggressive for asking why they were being stopped, hysterical for questioning his authority, difficult for knowing their rights. One woman, pulled over for a broken taillight that wasn't broken, wrote in her complaint that Bellamy had told her, "Women like you always have something to say." That complaint was dismissed as unsubstantiated. No witnesses, no recording. Black residents in the Eastway Division knew Bellamy's patrol car on site. They warned each other when he was working. They told their daughters to stay calm, stay silent, survive the encounter, and file the complaint later, even though filing never seemed to change anything. The department had protected Craig Bellamy for nearly 2 decades. Internal affairs had shielded him. His supervisors had vouched for him. The system had absorbed every accusation and returned him to the streets unchanged. But on this Thursday night, at a gas station on Independence Boulevard, the system's protection finally ran out, because for the first time in his career, Craig Bellamy had chosen the wrong victim. And unlike all the women who came before her, this one had the power to make the entire country watch. Judge Vivian Terrell was born in 1,966 inches, a 2-room house outside Valdosta, Georgia. Her mother worked as a seamstress for white families who paid barely enough to keep the lights on. Her father mopped floors at an elementary school his own daughter couldn't attend until integration came. Vivian walked 3 miles to a segregated school with leaking ceilings and outdated textbooks. She studied by kerosene lamp when the electricity got cut. She graduated valedictorian and became the first in her family to attend college, then the first to attend law school when Yale offered a full scholarship. She spent 5 years as a public defender in Atlanta, representing clients the system was designed to process rather than protect. She joined the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and spent 8 years litigating civil rights cases across the South: voting rights, housing discrimination, police brutality. She argued before appellate courts 17 times and won 14. At 41, she was appointed to State Superior Court. 7 years later, the president nominated her to the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. The confirmation was contentious. Senators questioned her civil rights work as though defending the Constitution was radical. She answered every question with measured composure and was confirmed 62-38. She became only the 3rd black woman in history to serve on that court. Her opinions were cited in law school textbooks. Her dissents were quoted by reform advocates nationwide. She believed the justice system could work for everyone if people were brave enough to demand it. On this Thursday night, she left her chambers at 9:23 p.m., her robe hanging on the door, her briefcase full of weekend work. She needed gas. The quick fuel station was on her route. She had stopped there dozens of times without incident. Tonight would be different. The Lexus pulled into pump 4 at 9:41 p.m. Judge Terrell stepped out into the warm evening air, still wearing the slacks and silk blouse from her day on the bench. Her judicial credentials sat in her wallet beside her driver's license. She inserted her credit card and reached for the nozzle. That was when she heard it. Tires on pavement, the flash of lights reflecting off metal. A patrol car pulled in behind her, angled to block any departure. Officer Craig Bellamy stepped out with his hand already resting on his weapon. "Don't move. Keep your hands where I can see them." Judge Terrell raised her hands slowly, palms open. "Is there a problem, officer?" "You match a description. Suspect in a vehicle theft." She processed this calmly. A 58-year-old woman in professional attire beside a car registered in her name. "Officer, this is my vehicle. I'm happy to show you my license and registration." Bellamy's response came fast. "Shut your mouth. I didn't ask you to talk." The words landed like a slap. In her courtroom, no one spoke that way. But here she wasn't a judge. She was simply a black woman, and he had already decided what that meant. "I'm cooperating fully," she said, "but I'd like to understand." "I said don't talk." He stepped closer. "You people always have something to say. Turn around. Hands on the vehicle. You people." 3 security cameras recorded everything. Her calm compliance, his aggression, the contempt dripping from every word. She turned and placed her hands on her car, feeling the situation spiral beyond reason. She was not the person he imagined. The footage would make that devastatingly clear. Judge Terrell stood with her hands pressed against the warm metal of her Lexus, her posture compliant, her breathing controlled. Decades of courtroom discipline had taught her to remain calm under pressure. She had faced hostile attorneys, volatile defendants, tense deliberations. She knew how to modulate her voice, how to project authority without aggression. "Officer," she said, her tone measured and respectful, "I'm a federal judge on the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. My credentials are in my purse on the front seat. If you'll allow me to show you. A bystander at Pump 7 had begun recording on her phone. The audio captured what came next with perfect clarity. Bellamy laughed. A short, ugly sound. A federal judge? Sure you are. And I'm the damn president. He stepped closer, his breath hot against the back of her neck. You people always have attitudes and excuses, every single time. Before she could respond, his hand clamped around her left arm. He wrenched it behind her back, twisting her wrist at an angle that sent pain shooting through her shoulder. The movement was sharp, practiced, deliberately excessive. Judge Terrell winced but didn't struggle. You're hurting me. Good. His voice was low, satisfied. Maybe you'll learn to cooperate. A second patrol car pulled into the station. Officer Nolan Pritchard, 29, stepped out and approached the scene. He was young, 3 years on the force, still building his career. He saw his senior partner with a black woman bent over the hood of a Lexus, her arm twisted behind her back, her face tight with pain. He did nothing. Judge Terrell turned her head toward him. Her eyes met his. She saw a choice being made in real time. The choice to intervene, to question, to simply ask what was happening. Pritchard looked away. He positioned himself a few feet back, hands on his belt, watching without watching. His silence would later be described by federal prosecutors in precise legal terms: complicity through cowardice. He had the authority to intervene. He had the obligation to question excessive force. He had a duty to protect. He fulfilled none of them. The pain in her shoulder was sharp and constant, but Judge Terrell forced herself to breathe through it. She had handled worse in her life. She had survived worse. What she needed now was to de-escalate, to reach her credentials, to end this encounter before it went further. "Officer," she said again, her voice strained but controlled, "please, just let me show you my identification. Everything will be clear." For a moment, there was silence. Bellamy's grip on her arm loosened slightly. Perhaps some part of him recognized that her composure didn't match the narrative he had constructed. Perhaps some instinct warned him that this wasn't going the way it should. But that moment passed. I said, "Shut up." The kick came without warning. His boot connected with the back of her knee, buckling her leg instantly. She pitched forward, off balance, and before she could catch herself, his hands were on her shoulders, shoving downward with brutal force. Her face hit the concrete. The sound was sickening, a crack that echoed across the station, audible on every recording. Her cheekbone fractured on impact, the bone giving way against oil-stained pavement. Blood began pooling immediately, spreading beneath her face in a dark, widening stain. Her reading glasses flew from her face and skittered across the ground. One lens shattered against the concrete. Bellamy dropped his knee onto her spine, driving his full 220 pounds into her back. She felt the air crush out of her lungs, felt her ribs compress under the pressure, felt the cold bite of handcuffs ratcheting tight around her wrists, metal edges digging into flesh hard enough to leave bruises that would be photographed for weeks. "Stop resisting!" Bellamy shouted, loud enough for the cameras to capture. But Judge Vivian Terrell was not resisting. All 3 security cameras showed the same thing: a 58-year-old woman lying completely motionless on the ground, eyes closed, blood spreading beneath her face. Witnesses would later describe her lips moving silently, forming words none of them could hear. She was praying. A woman at Pump 3 screamed. A man in a pickup truck fumbled for his phone and began recording. Inside the station, the attendant watched through bulletproof glass with his hand already on the telephone. He dialed 911. "I need to report an assault," he said. "A police officer is attacking a woman at my gas station. She's bleeding. She's not moving. Please send help." 4 people watched Judge Vivian Terrell's face hit the concrete. 4 people who could have looked away, minded their own business, told themselves it wasn't their problem. They didn't. Denise Okafor, 34, was filling her tank at Pump 3 when she heard the commotion. As a trauma nurse at Charlotte Memorial, she had treated countless victims of violence. She recognized immediately what she was seeing: the excessive force, the unnecessary escalation, the blood pooling on pavement. She raised her phone and began recording. "I'm documenting this," she shouted, her voice cutting across the station. "This is police brutality. I'm a nurse, and this woman needs medical attention." Bellamy's head snapped toward her. "Ma'am, step back or you'll be arrested for obstruction." Denise didn't move. "I'm on public property and I'm recording. That's my right." Raymond Chu, 67, had been sitting in his pickup truck at Pump 7 when the patrol car arrived. He was a retired Marine, 3 tours in Vietnam, a man who had seen violence in forms most people couldn't imagine. He stepped out of his truck and walked toward the scene with the steady gait of someone who had long ago stopped being afraid. "I've seen prisoners of war treated better than this," he said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who meant every word. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Bellamy pointed at him. "Sir, back off right now or I'm placing you under arrest." Chu stopped 3 feet away and crossed his arms. "Arrest me then. I'm not moving." At Pump 5, Keisha Bonner, 22, had her phone pressed to her ear with one hand and held it up to record with the other. She was a junior at Johnson C. Smith University, daughter of Reverend Isaiah Bonner, one of Charlotte's most prominent civil rights pastors. "Daddy," she said into the phone, her voice shaking but clear, "I'm at the Quick Fuel on Independence. A cop just slammed a woman into the ground. She's bleeding. She's not moving. I'm recording everything." Inside the station, behind bulletproof glass, Mateo Reyes watched the security monitors with growing horror. He was 41, a father of 3, working the night shift to make ends meet. He had seen police stops at his station before. He had never seen anything like this. His hands moved quickly across the keyboard. He backed up the security footage to a personal drive, then pulled out his phone and texted his brother. "Cop just beat up a woman at my station. I have everything. This isn't disappearing. 4 witnesses, 4 recordings, 4 people who refused to stay silent." Bellamy kept his knee pressed into Judge Terrell's back as he conducted a rough search. His hands moved across her body in ways that made Denise Okafor shout objections from her position at Pump 3. "That's inappropriate. You don't need to touch her like that." Bellamy ignored her. He grabbed the purse from the front seat of the Lexus and upended it onto the concrete beside Judge Terrell's bleeding face. The contents scattered across the pavement: a wallet, lipstick, a glasses case, car keys, breath mints, a leather credential folder embossed with gold lettering. Bellamy picked up the wallet first, flipping it open to examine the driver's license. Then his eyes moved to the credential folder. He opened it. Inside was a federal judicial credential bearing Judge Terrell's photograph, a Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals identification badge, and a card identifying her as a member of the Judicial Conference of the United States, signed by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court himself. The security camera at angle 2 captured Bellamy's face with devastating clarity, the color draining from his cheeks, the realization spreading across his features, the understanding, sudden and complete, that the woman bleeding beneath his knee was one of the most powerful judges in the federal judiciary. His partner Pritchard stepped forward, peering at the credentials. His whisper was picked up by Keisha Bonner's phone, held just 15 feet away. "Oh God. Oh my God." For a long moment, no one moved. The witnesses waited, expecting Bellamy to uncuff her, to apologize, to radio for medical assistance, to do something that acknowledged the catastrophic magnitude of his error. He did none of those things. "These could be fake," he said finally, his voice stripped of its earlier aggression but hard with something else. "Desperation. Denial. Anyone can make fake IDs. We're taking her in for verification." Raymond Chu's voice cut through the night. "You're not serious." Bellamy hauled Judge Terrell up by her cuffed wrists, her shoulders wrenching at the angle. Blood still dripped from the gash on her cheek. Her silk blouse was stained, her slacks torn at the knee. She made no sound as he walked her to the patrol car, opened the back door, and loaded her inside like cargo. The door slammed shut. The witnesses kept recording. And somewhere in Washington, phones were about to start ringing. The patrol car pulled into the precinct garage at 10:31 p.m. Officer Bellamy hauled Judge Terrell out of the back seat by her arm, her wrists still cuffed behind her, dried blood caked on her cheek. Her silk blouse was stained dark. Her left eye had begun to swell shut. She was processed like any other arrest, photographed, fingerprinted, led down a fluorescent-lit hallway to a holding cell with a metal bench and a steel toilet. The door clanged shut behind her. "I need medical attention," she said through the bars. "My face is injured. I believe my cheekbone is fractured." The booking officer didn't look up from his paperwork. "Someone will be with you." No one came. "I need to make a phone call. That's my constitutional right." "Processing takes time, ma'am. Have a seat." She sat on the cold metal bench, her hands still cuffed, her face throbbing. She had spent her career in courtrooms, watching defendants invoke rights that were sometimes honored and sometimes ignored. Now she understood, in a way she never fully had before, what it felt like to be on the other side. "My credentials are in Officer Bellamy's possession," she said, her voice steady despite the pain. "I am a federal judge, Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals. Verify it. One phone call." The officer finally looked at her. His expression was bored, dismissive. "Lady, everyone in here says there's somebody important." For 1 hour and 23 minutes, Judge Vivian Terrell sat in that cell, bleeding, ignored, denied every request. A sitting federal appellate judge, appointed by the president, confirmed by the Senate, treated like her words meant nothing. At 11:54 p.m., Sergeant Victor Langford finally examined the credentials Bellamy had tossed onto his desk. His face went white. One phone call to the Fourth Circuit's emergency line. One confirmation from the duty clerk. The precinct erupted into silent panic. 20 minutes later, Judge Terrell was uncuffed, surrounded by apologetic supervisors, offered ice she no longer needed. She noted every minute, every denial, every face. By midnight, the Chief Justice of the United States had been personally informed. Judge Harold Freeman of the Fourth Circuit, awakened by a call from the hospital where his colleague was being treated, made the call himself. "A federal judge was assaulted by police," he said. "She's in the emergency room with a fractured cheekbone. This happened in Charlotte." The Chief Justice listened in silence. Then, "I want the Attorney General notified tonight." By 6 a.m., the FBI Charlotte field office had opened a federal civil rights investigation. Agents arrived at the quick fuel station before sunrise, securing all security footage, photographing the bloodstains still visible on the concrete. By 8 a.m., the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division had dispatched a team on a chartered flight from Washington. This was no longer a case being monitored. It was a case being directly managed by the highest levels of federal law enforcement. By noon, the Fourth Circuit issued an unprecedented joint statement. 12 judges, signing together. "We express our profound outrage at the violent assault on our esteemed colleague and the apparent systemic failures that enabled it." The Federal Judges Association called it an attack on the independence of the judiciary itself. The president was briefed during her morning intelligence meeting. The Attorney General made a personal phone call to Judge Terrell's hospital room. The Congressional Black Caucus demanded immediate hearings. The Charlotte Police Department attempted to get ahead of the storm. A quiet apology, an internal review, standard damage control. The offer was rejected immediately. Judge Terrell released a single statement through the Fourth Circuit's communications office. "I will pursue every legal remedy available under the Constitution I have sworn to uphold, not for myself, but for every black woman who has experienced this and did not have credentials to produce. For every woman who was not believed, for every citizen whose rights were violated by those sworn to protect them." This was no longer local. This was federal, and everyone involved was about to learn what accountability actually looked like. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department followed its standard playbook. Within 24 hours, Internal Affairs classified the incident as under review. Officer Bellamy was placed on paid administrative leave. His partner Pritchard returned to desk duty. Sergeant Langford continued supervising his shift as though nothing had happened. The police union issued a statement that Friday afternoon. "Officer Bellamy has a right to due process. Officers make split-second decisions under pressure, and we urge the public to wait for the facts before rushing to judgment." It was the same script used dozens of times before. Delay, deflect, wait for public attention to fade, let the internal investigation drag on until everyone forgot, but this time the machinery broke down. Mateo Reyes, the gas station attendant, had backed up the security footage the night of the assault. When two detectives arrived Saturday morning requesting that the original files be secured for the investigation, he understood exactly what that meant. He had seen footage disappear before. He had watched cases die quiet deaths. Not this time. By Saturday evening, the footage was in the hands of Carmen Vasquez, an investigative journalist at the Charlotte Observer. By Sunday morning, it was online. 8 million views in the first 24 hours. The images were devastating. A composed, dignified woman in professional attire, hands raised in compliance, slammed face first into concrete without provocation, a knee grinding into her spine while she lay motionless, blood pooling beneath her cheek. When news reports revealed the victim was a sitting federal appellate judge, the story detonated internationally. BBC, CNN, Al Jazeera, Le Monde. The footage played on every network, in every language, on every continent. The police union president attempted damage control with a second statement. It became instantly infamous. Officers can't be expected to recognize every judge or dignitary. Judge Terrell could have de-escalated the situation by simply complying without speaking. The statement trended for 3 days. Compliance without speaking. The phrase became a symbol of everything broken in American policing. The FBI subpoenaed all bodycam footage from Bellamy's career. Investigators discovered his camera had malfunctioned during 23 previous use-of-force incidents. Every single one involved a person of color. Federal prosecutors moved with unprecedented speed. 7 weeks after the assault, a federal grand jury returned indictments. Officer Craig Bellamy faced 4 counts: deprivation of rights under color of law under 18 U.S.C. Section 242, assault resulting in bodily injury, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice. His incident report had claimed Judge Terrell became combative and had to be restrained. The footage showed a woman who never raised her voice, never lifted a hand, never resisted in any way. Officer Nolan Pritchard was indicted on 2 counts: failure to intervene and accessory to civil rights violations. His silence at the gas station, his refusal to question his partner, his decision to look away when Judge Terrell met his eyes, all of it now carried criminal consequences. Sergeant Victor Langford faced charges for deliberate indifference resulting in denial of medical care. 1 hour and 23 minutes. That was how long a bleeding federal judge sat in his precinct while he processed paperwork. The police union's legal defense fund, which had protected officers for decades, announced it would not cover Bellamy's defense. The abandonment was stunning, a signal that even his allies recognized the case was indefensible. Bellamy hired a private attorney who attempted a media strategy. His client had made an honest mistake in a high-pressure situation. Anyone could have misread the circumstances. The officer was simply doing his job. The U.S. attorney responded at a press conference that afternoon. The only mistake Officer Bellamy made was believing his badge granted him the right to brutalize citizens with impunity. The footage shows no mistake. It shows malice, bigotry, and contempt for the very rights he swore to protect. This office will pursue justice to the fullest extent of the law. The trial date was set, and Craig Bellamy, for the first time in his career, had no one left to protect him. The federal trial began on a gray Monday morning in Charlotte and lasted 3 weeks. It became the most watched criminal proceeding in the country, a national referendum on police accountability broadcast live on every major network. Prosecutors built their case methodically, devastatingly. The gas station footage played frame by frame on courtroom monitors, synchronized with audio captured by witness phones. The jury watched Bellamy approach with his hand on his weapon. They heard him tell Judge Terrell to shut her mouth. They watched him twist her arm behind her back. They saw the kick to her knee, the shove, the sickening moment her face hit concrete. They watched his knee drive into her spine while she lay motionless. They heard him shout, "Stop resisting," at a woman who had never moved. Medical records documented the damage: a fractured cheekbone requiring surgical intervention, Nerve damage in her left wrist from handcuffs ratcheted too tight, chronic pain she would carry for the rest of her life. Bellamy's personnel file was entered into evidence. 31 complaints across 17 years, 0 sustained findings. Prosecutors highlighted the pattern. Black women specifically targeted, accused of attitude and aggression for exercising basic rights. Statistical analysis showed Bellamy stopped black female drivers at 14 times the rate of white female drivers. Then came the suspect description that supposedly justified everything: a 25-year-old male, 6'1", neck tattoos, shaved head. Judge Terrell was 58 years old, female, 5'4", shoulder-length gray hair, no tattoos. The defense argued Bellamy genuinely believed he was acting on a legitimate description. Under cross-examination, he could not explain why he stopped an elderly woman based on a description of a young man. He could not explain why he refused to examine her credentials. He could not explain why the assault continued after she was clearly compliant. He could not explain why his Bodycam malfunctioned when it had worked fine on 3 previous stops that same evening. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Pritchard, who had accepted a plea deal, received 2 years. Langford pleaded guilty and received 14 months. The sentencing judge, a white man appointed by a Republican president, looked directly at Bellamy. "You did not make a mistake. You committed a crime. You believed your uniform made you untouchable. You were wrong." 9 years in federal prison. The civil lawsuit followed. Judge Terrell filed a 94-page complaint against Bellamy, Pritchard, Langford, the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department, and the City of Charlotte. It documented not only her assault, but the department's decades-long pattern of protecting officers who violated citizens' rights. Discovery revealed what internal communications had hidden for years. Supervisors had dismissed complaints against Bellamy as coming from the usual suspects, a phrase appearing 11 times in departmental emails, always referring to black complainants. The city's attorneys recognized what a trial would mean: institutional racism exposed under oath, years of cover-ups documented in public record. They recommended immediate settlement. The terms were unprecedented: $5.7 million in damages, a comprehensive federal consent decree governing the department for 15 years, mandatory bias, training with external oversight, a civilian review board with full subpoena power, automatic investigations for officers with more than 3 complaints, all Bodycam footage and use of force cases released publicly within 10 days, quarterly demographic audits of stops, searches, and arrests, termination as the penalty for Bodycam noncompliance, an early intervention system to identify problem officers before they accumulated victims. Judge Terrell accepted the settlement. Then she donated every dollar. The entire $5.7 million went to establish the Terrell Justice Initiative, a nonprofit providing free legal representation to victims of police misconduct. Its specific focus: black women. "They are so often disbelieved," she said in her announcement, "dismissed, erased from these conversations about justice. This fund exists so they will have someone to fight for them, whether or not they have credentials to show." Officer Craig Bellamy was transported to a federal correctional facility in Beckley, West Virginia, 3 days after sentencing. He would serve his time among inmates who knew exactly what he had done. The footage had played everywhere. There was no anonymity for a cop who had brutalized a federal judge on camera. He filed 2 appeals. Both were denied. In interviews with his attorney, he maintained until the end that he had done what any officer would have done. He never apologized. He never acknowledged wrongdoing. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked in all 50 states through a national decertification database created partly in response to his case. Craig Bellamy would never wear a badge again. Pritchard served his 2 years at a minimum security facility in South Carolina. Upon release, he moved to Arizona, changed careers, and disappeared from public life. His law enforcement career was over. The silence he had chosen at that gas station followed him like a shadow. Langford took early retirement rather than face demotion and reassignment. His pension was reduced by 40%. He sold his house in Charlotte and moved to a small town in Tennessee where no one knew his name. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department entered a new era under federal oversight. Monitors reported quarterly to the Department of Justice. Training protocols were rewritten. Complaint processes were restructured. Officers with patterns of misconduct were identified and removed. It was the most significant reform in the department's history. But Judge Vivian Terrell carried more than a settlement and a legacy of change. She carried a scar beneath her left eye where the concrete had split her skin, thin and pale now, but permanent. She carried nerve damage in her left wrist that made her hand tremble slightly when she wrote, visible from the bench during oral arguments. She carried the memory of lying on oil-stained pavement, blood pooling beneath her face, knowing that without her credentials, without witnesses, without cameras, her case would have been buried like countless others. 6 months after the trial, she stood at a podium in Howard University's Crampton Auditorium facing 200 law school graduates in caps and gowns. Her voice was steady, but those in the front rows could see the emotion in her eyes. "I have spent my life in service to the law," she began. "I have believed, despite everything, that the system can be made to work." That night at a gas station in Charlotte, that belief was tested as it has never been tested before. She paused. "I lay on the ground bleeding, in handcuffs, and I wondered if I had been wrong all along." The auditorium was silent. "But I am here today because witnesses refused to look away, because a gas station attendant protected evidence instead of surrendering it, because ordinary people chose courage over comfort." Her voice strengthened. "The system did not save me that night. People did. And that is what I want you to remember. The law is only as just as the people willing to fight for it. Be those people. Every single day. Be those people." The applause that followed lasted 4 minutes. The gas station footage is now shown in police academies across 34 states. It is taught in law schools as a case study in civil rights enforcement. It is referenced in congressional testimony on police reform. The small quick fuel station on Independence Boulevard has become an unlikely landmark, the place where a federal judge was thrown to the ground and where justice eventually prevailed. But Judge Terrell knows what too few acknowledge. For every case like hers, there are thousands where no credentials exist, no witnesses step forward, no footage survives. The Terrell Justice Initiative has taken on 847 cases in its first 2 years. She reads every intake file personally. Every account of a black woman disbelieved, dismissed, or brutalized passes through her hands. And every time, she touches the scar beneath her eye. Justice is not a guarantee. It is a fight, and the fight never ends. Now, watching footage like this, it can really stick with you, right? Some of these clips stay in your head, especially late at night when you're trying to fall asleep. And speaking of sleep, if you're someone who lies awake at 2 or 3 a.m., mind racing, unable to shut off, I know how frustrating that is. You're exhausted, but your brain just won't stop. And the worst part? The less you sleep, the worse it gets. Your energy crashes, your mood suffers, everything feels harder than it should. I struggled with this for years. Tried melatonin, white noise, warm milk, nothing worked long term. Then I found something called the 30-Day Uninterrupted Sleep Reset. It's a science-based program, no pills, no medication, that actually retrains your brain to sleep through the night. 7 to 8 hours, uninterrupted. Over 30 days, it rewires your sleep system. And once you're done, you keep the results. There's a maintenance plan so you don't slip back. Look, if you've tried everything and nothing sticks, this is different. Check the link in the description. Seriously, try it, and I'll catch you in the next story.